Welcome to the Full Tactical Range by Range Systems. I'm Bo Dobozinski, and this is your drill of the week. This week, we're going to work on target transitions. Which target transitions? All of them. Let's get started. What we're going to do is we're going to work all three of our target transitions, and to make the world a little bit more interesting, we're going to add in actually a fourth target transition. So each target transition is based on what it is that we can see. What I mean by see is normally we have a big field of vision, 180 degrees. But when we go under lots and lots of stress, that field of vision is going to narrow in, usually into something ballpark like a 45-degree cone. The first target transition is line of sight. Line of sight simply means that both targets are clearly within my field of vision. For us, with a firearm, how that would work is I'd look at target number one, line of sights, shot, reset, keep everything in a line, move to target number two, shot, reset. With inside 45 degrees, I can clearly see target number one that is in my vision. Perfectly clear. But target number two is right at the edge of that 45-degree cone. And so that one starts to become harder to identify. This being the case, I'd engage target number one, reset. Now I'm going to have to turn and look at target number two. When I turn to look at target number two, I have to take my finger off the trigger because I no longer have sight alignment. Now, the body would push and rotate the gun to target number two. My finger goes back on the trigger and I can engage target number two. That's our inside 45. Outside 45 degrees means that target number one is perfectly clear inside of my vision. But target number two is outside of my vision entirely, which means two things. One, I don't know if it's a threat. Two, I don't know how close or how far away that target happens to be. The big risk here is, let's say I engage target number one and leave the firearm out like I did for inside 45 and head to target number two. If they happen to be very close to me, what I have now is potentially wrestling for the firearm, which would be bad. So for the outside 45 degrees, we have to engage target number one, reset, then pull the firearm back. Finger comes off the trigger, I'm back in, I'm close, like I can hang onto the gun and fight with it. And then now my entire body turns to address target number two, and I would present the firearm based upon the range to the threat to me. So if the threat was close, it would stay in retention. If the threat was far, the gun would move all the way out to full presentation. The last target transition that we're going to do is something called a dynamic weapon position transition. The idea with this is sometimes I don't want to just sweep something or move the muzzle straight through from target one to target two. Sometimes I would like to make sure that I avoid whatever it is that's in between target one and target two so I don't point at it. In this case, I would use a dynamic weapon position transition. With this one, target number one is engaged here. Then I'm going to have to pull the firearm back to a dynamic weapon position. In our case, we might use two hands low, two hands high, one hand low. You would go ahead and pick. But either way, as soon as I move through, I wouldn't sweep my target downrange. Now you see there's obviously a difference between the outside 45 where I just left the muzzle right level, moved one target to the other engaged, and the dynamic weapon position transition where I actually would avoid something with the muzzle of the firearm. The question now is well, why wouldn't you just always do one or the other? And that's what I would call a tactical dependence. So remember, there's a difference between tactic and technique. Technique is just how something is done. Tactic is when or why it would be done. There is a give and take in moving between those two different techniques. So if, for example, I have a target number one that's lethal threat, and I got target number two that's lethal threat, and I have something in here I would like to not sweep with the muzzle. So let's say I engage target number one, I shoot it, it goes down. I pull back in, target number two there, it's lethal. I swept the target I didn't want to sweep, and I engage the other target, target two. By doing that, that's the fastest way I could get between target number one and target number two. But I put my no-shoot target at risk because the muzzle was pointed right at it for a split second. The other way to look at it is I don't want to put this target at risk at all. So bang, bang, bang. Now I go to transition and I move, and then the gun has to come out. It's slower, which puts me at more risk because that lethal threat is still trying to get me, and I took longer to get to target number two. So the choice really is up to you which of those two transitions you want to work on the most. What I'm here to show you is the tools you should have in the toolbox that you've been working on. So those are our four types of transitions. We have the line of sight, inside 45, outside 45, and dynamic weapon position transition. Now let's look at the course downrange. What I've got set up downrange is I have a grand total of 8 targets. I have 2 that are close together in lanes 2 and 3. Those ones are going to be our line of sight targets. A little bit further behind them is targets in lanes 4 and lane 1. Those are going to be our line of sight targets. I have 2 papers on the sidewall. Those sidewall pages are going to be our outside 45 degrees. And then I have 2 more sheets here at about the 90 from me, and those ones are going to be our dynamic weapon position transition. Now the idea is from the first shot, every single movement that we're going to do is going to be a target transition of some sort. So we'll do shot number 1 to lane 3. From lane 3, we'll do line of sight transition to engage in target in lane 2. From lane 2, we're going to go to lane 4. That's an inside 45-degree transition, so we have to make that inside 45-degree transition. From there, we're going to go from lane 4 to lane 1. When we do that, that's another inside 45-degree transition, just going the other way. From lane 4, we're going to go to our wall target over here for our first outside 45-degree transition. So we went from 2 to 3 to 4 to 1 to outside number 1. Then we're going to do outside 45-degree transition to target number, outside 45 number 2. Then from there, we're going to pull that firearm back in, do the dynamic transition to wall target number 1, and same thing to wall target number 2. So grand total of 8 shots from the draw going down. Now you'll notice that these 2 targets here are very close to me. This being the case, I'm going to engage both of those targets from retention rather than full presentation. Your type of retention might be different than my type of retention, so do what works for you. And you may not have range systems, amazing ballistic technology and 270-degree shooting. That's okay. Do this with a cert, dry fire. We're still getting the same neural pathway development and developing these skills. It's totally worth it. So let's run the drill. So that drill is lots of fun. I really like doing this kind of stuff where it's challenging my brain and challenging the technique, and you start to push for speed and you're pushing to see what your accuracy looks like. It's a really good time, and we really get to see kind of what our limit is. But again, this is us, so we obviously could make this a lot more challenging. And so let's do that. So what I have are 2 magazines here, and there's a couple of people that are here watching me film today. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand those 2 magazines off to them. They're going to fill these 2 magazines with the 8 rounds divvied up any way they want. So they may set it up where it's 4 and 4. It could be 6 and 2. It could be 1 and 7. However they want to set it up, they can set it up inside the magazines. And then they're going to hand it back to me. I'll put one in my magazine pouch. The other one will go inside of my firearm. And now we're going to go ahead and do this drill, but I don't get to know when I'm going to be forced to make an emergency reload. So let's play with that. So I'm sure you guys are seeing that I was using a neat weapon aid from Viridian Weapon Tech. This is their C5. And a nice tool to use that adds on is a nice aid piece for your particular defensive handgun. These particular tools, whether it's something like this or you've got like some sort of a reflex sight up on your firearm, remember that the aids are there to help you perform your skills faster and more accurately. Technology is great, but we also have to be ready that these are not going to work properly. Something's going to go wrong. The battery is going to die. It gets smashed, whatever it is. Maybe we don't have this firearm. We have a different firearm that we have to use. And so make sure that you're also doing drills that don't have any of the other aided factors that you may be used to running all the time. For me, I did this entire drill after I did it with the C5, I did it without the C5 on. And the general change for me in target acquisition was ballpark between 1 and 2/10 of a second, depending upon the transition. That being the case, I should still be fairly close whether or not I had the aid or not had the aid. And that allows us to say, okay, my skills are still solid whether or not, and I'm not depending on any piece of technology to be able to perform the skill. Now, obviously, I made the drill one step harder with that emergency reload in the middle. You could add in reloads, you could add in malfunctions. You could also set up where you have somebody with a cert pistol, not a live one like this one. You could set them up with a cert pistol off at an off angle to you, and when you get set up to go, right, the buzzer starts, they could actually light up a target that you have to engage first. So now you're engaging the targets in a non-linear method. So this is a very linear deal. One, dun, 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 right? You could set it up that way where it has to be done in a more challenging way. You have to think it. You could have to keep moving. You could set up places of cover that you have to do it from. Lots of ways to do this, but it's all dependent that those foundational skills are built. Remember that any advanced tactic is based upon the mastery of the fundamentals. So never neglect those. I hope you enjoyed this drill. Make sure you practice it in dry fire no matter what. And if you can't do it live, do it only in drive and start adding in all of those different challenges that I was talking about. And we'll see you in the next drill of the week. Like what you saw? Subscribe to my YouTube channel and keep checking out the training blog for more tips and drills.